Welcome to Truck That for June. We've upped the ante this month and come down to the studios in Canberra to set something up for you a little bit different. As our club is still growing slowly, we need people to be involved. We are going to look for three things that the club can aim to achieve. Now, many of you will know of getting fellows who get a ticket for being over the white line going under a safety cam. And we've raised the issue before that $1,200 fine has nothing whatsoever to do with road safety, and we believe it to be unreasonable and unfair. So following this month's episode, and as a part of that, we're going to write to all of the associations. We're going to write to NatRoad, to the ATA, to the state associations. We'll include the TWU, the NTC, the NHVR. And we're going to ask for those two specific fines involving safety cam. So one is if you are travelling too close, and what we want to do is have lines drawn on the road so that as you come up to the safety cam site, you know what that safe distance is, because of course the camera will knock you off at 59 metres and you don't know whether you're at 59 or 61, and that's going to get you a $1,300 fine for being too close. So we want that fine either withdrawn or made more reasonable for the offence, and we want the lines drawn to help us achieve compliance. So that's one part of it. The second is those fellows who get a fine for crossing the white line when in theory what they are pinging you for is attempted avoidance of the safety cam. Now, unless you drive out in the bloody scrub, you can't avoid the camera. And the fact that the camera will take a photo of you being over the white line shows that you can't avoid it. Therefore, it's a completely ludicrous fine. It has nothing whatsoever to do with road safety. So those are the two things we're going to ask for that. The second thing is that we want to do something that most drivers recognise. So if we get that done for you, blokes that have got a fine, look, we can't go back and change the legislation in the past. And I've only in the last week had two specific people I know of have been given a fine for that offence. So we want that actioned. We want to say that this is the club stepping up to do something. And we want your support. So if you've got one of those tickets, let us know. If you've got a fine, let us know. Make contact with us so that we can build a bit of a case to support that. The second thing is I'm going to ask for split rest. Now, I've already written to NHVR and asked for them to recognise split rest in our logbook. Now, there are days when you get somewhere, you get messed around, you try and do the right thing, you have a couple of hours kip in the afternoon, and yet that night you still have to have a legally required 7-hour break. Now, we know that doesn't work for everybody, and not everybody will benefit from that change. Same as the first one. Not everybody will benefit, but we've got to have a template on which to start. So we want to show you the club has some activity. We want to show you that there's an opportunity to do something to improve our lot. So the second one of those is we're going to ask for split rest. We don't want it every night. We know they won't give it to us that way, but we want it perhaps twice a week. And we recognise that in having split rest, we've got to have that bit more time. So would you agree that if we ask for split rest to a maximum of twice a week, not on consecutive nights, but we will give a total of 8 hours instead of the 7? That's number 2. We'll be back in a minute to talk about number 3. G'day, I'm Rod Hannafy, and I'd like to invite you to join the Truck That Australia Drivers Club. We know there's a hell of a lot of frustration out there. We hope there's a lot of blokes that want to do something positive to change the industry and how we're seen. So we have 3 platforms. We have Safe Home, Safe on the Road, and Mateship. Go to www.truckingnation.com.au, join up and help us improve how we are seen. Welcome back. So the third thing that we're looking at is aims of the Truck That Australia Drivers Club is rest areas. Now, we've made a start. We have a national set of guidelines for heavy vehicle rest areas, which means that anybody that builds one has to go and look at the guidelines. That's a step forward. But what are we doing to have a national overview and a program to get those done? Now, we've spoken of green reflectors. We've spoken of not having enough rest areas. Currently in America, they brought in onboard recording devices. We're looking at EWDs in Australia. They're mandatory in the states as of December last year, and now that they're starting to impact, they're having a lot of issues with truck drivers parking on on-ramps on freeways. They're running out of hours. They're having to pull up somewhere to avoid getting a fine. And in America, they have a thing called a CSA, which is virtually a record of your driving history. And if you get all these tickets, then you go and apply for a job and it comes back against you that you've got all these tickets and therefore you're not going to get a job. In the UK, there was a big thing a little while ago where you pay to park in a roadhouse in England. And if you don't get in there, you park in a side street. So now they're chasing the trucks out of the side streets and fining you for doing that. So we are not alone with the problem. We've spoken to Lee Campbell. We did an interview with Lee previously. He's trying to get a rest area built in Wagga Wagga. There is one out at Gumley Gumley, but there is nothing centrally located.
Okay, I've been running a public campaign, and I've had articles in the paper and Owner Driver magazine, and I've put wanted truck stop signs up on the places where I want them. I want one here and out at the Bowman Industrial Estate. I've asked I've rang several times, or twice now actually, for the member for Riverina, who's our federal member. He's also the Minister for Transport, and now he's the Deputy Prime Minister as well. So I'm still waiting to get any kind of reply from him. I've seen the member for Wagga, and he has submitted my ideas and what I've asked for to the State Minister for Transport. So I'm still waiting on a reply from that.
So obviously with anything like this, it is a big ask. There's a lot involved. You are talking about substantial money. To get something, even if we started off with a bit of dirt, would be a step forward to where we are. But in the longer term, of course, if we can get someone else to support it and recognise the need, then over time maybe we can get those facilities provided.
I think it'd be a lot to ask a fuel company to come here and put in parking for 60, 70 trucks or something, and a weighbridge, and then have to build the facilities on top of that. I think myself that probably the state and federal government have to come good with the parking area, the land, the parking area and the weighbridge, and just leave the actual physical building of the service centre itself to the fuel company.
Yeah, it is hard. We've got to recognise, of course, their concerns. They're there to make money and sell fuel. That's one side of it. The other is the parking. But then if you're a truck driver in Wagga, and of course many other local areas are now bringing in laws that you can't take your truck home, you can't park it anywhere, you can't leave it. And what are we supposed to do? You can't just put them in your pocket. We need somewhere safe to leave them.
Well, there is one. There is one place here that's safe to leave it, and it's the only place that's advertising truck parking in Wagga, and that's the local brothel.
There you go. So that's a bit different. But again, you're still parking on the street.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're not.
Yeah, but even on the streets here, like this one down here where there is room to park trucks, and it's got a signs up all the way along it. No vehicles over 4.9 metres, which is a ute or a car.
Yeah. And in our interview with Lee, he's an individual. He's trying to do something. We recognise that. But he is not going to achieve that on his own. We then also spoke with Ben Maguire. And Ben says not only does our new Federal Transport Minister, Mr McCormack, recognise the need for rest areas, but it is something that everybody knows about, but who's doing anything about it?
Oh, look, I think there's a lot of work to do in rest areas. It's pretty crazy in 2018 where we acknowledge the road freight task is going to double, and yet everywhere we drove today, we're seeing potential rest areas being closed. We're worried about fatigue and how drivers are managing their fatigue, and yet we're not giving people a sensible and safe place to stop and rest. We've already raised this with Michael McCormack, and he's genuinely interested, and he sees that it's also linked to an industry-wide problem of attracting new people to the industry. You know, if we're going to ask people to come and sign up and have a career in an industry that you love and I love and lots of people do, we're going to need to be smarter about how we care for these people when they come and work in trucking.
So what we're going to ask for is a national rest area strategy. We want drivers involved, and it's something that is not impossible to achieve, but can't be done on a local basis. Because if you're going to, at the moment, the problem we have is we lose one rest area in one place and the government says this is no good or it's unsafe. We shut that one. a bloke in another district shuts another, a bloke in another district shuts another, and we've lost those sites, we can't get them back. We need a top-down approach that recognises the need for rest areas. Now, everybody says we must manage our fatigue, we must operate safely, we must do all these things to comply with the law. Now, at the moment I'm working with TCA, Transport Certification Australia. There are maps, certainly, of rest areas provided by each state. At the moment, there is nothing that includes the green reflectors, the informal bays, and that's something that should be a national program. So we're going to get a map of current rest areas, formal ones. We're going to overlay that with a map of informal rest areas, and then we are going to overlay that with fatigue crashes. So part of the problem now is you drive down the road and you think, geez, I haven't seen a rest area for a while, when you could have passed one 5 minutes ago. It's something you can't really keep in your mind. But if you had a map of it, we had an overlay of both formal, informal, and then you put fatigue crashes, and you might find that, see, there's a gap of 50 kilometres. And it has no rest areas, whether formal or informal, and there's been a number of fatigue crashes. So straight away we can say there is a problem area. If there was a rest area, then there wouldn't, in theory, be as many fatigue crashes. So we hope that we can put that forward to the government, that we get truck drivers involved, because we need to have a say in what they build. We've got that strategy now where we've got the rest area guidelines there before they can build one. And I've only had a gentleman complain recently of one built on the Hume that is again on a downward slope. Now, it's not as bad as the one at Conroy's, which they built on a 45-degree slope. How are you going to sleep in the truck like that? But again, the people that currently design them don't sleep in them. And look, we recognise Ben Maguire. He did a piece about sleeping in truck rest areas. We compliment him on what he did in the intent. But one night there, and the fact that even though he's tried, that itself is not going to solve the problem. So we need a far bigger thing. So in that letter, that will include our rest area requirement for strategy, and we want to get more support to get that problem solved. So that's number 3. We're working on it. Back soon. So to see from the other side of the camera, I'd like to introduce you to the founder of White Line Television, Mr. Stephen McCarthy. Stephen and I were put together by a couple of mates that said we should meet. We've got together and done Truck That Australia and formed the Truck That Australia Drivers Club, and I had a chance to have a chat with Stephen. Let's see what he had to say. So g'day Stephen, how you going, mate?
Nervous.
There you go. Now you started White Line Television about 2 years ago.
Yep.
You and I have been together for about 12 months doing Truck That. It's been an interesting 12 months. What made you start White Line Television?
Do you know, it's one of those things that it started back in the 80s, to be perfectly honest. I used to do Sydney to Perth Express, and going into Perth one morning I thought, people really need to see this stuff. And then I let it go for a while and went and did a few other things after transport and got in television, and then really thought this is what our industry needs to, A, showcase the stuff that goes on, B, like after we lost so many legends of the industry not so long ago, you know, people like Berrima Bob and Peg that used to run across the West, and Paul Costantino, people like that, you just think about how many stories we lost. And all of those things that we'll never ever get again. And so that was kind of the reason behind it, was to try and reinforce some of those stories. And then, of course, you know, we had a mutual friend that said you and I should get together, and I really got into the stuff that you're doing with parking bays and the green reflector thing, and I thought that was fantastic, and what a great fit, and it has been, you know, it's been really good.
So you're a full-time driver now.
Yes.
You were before. You went out of the industry. You'd had enough of it. So we've discussed how people come and go and get to that point where they've had enough. You went off and did full-time television, production TV, or right into that. So you're very much involved and knowledgeable there. You've now brought that knowledge back and come back to the transport industry and seen that need.
Mm-hmm.
We've started Truck That Australia. We're getting to some of the people. Mm-hmm. We certainly aim, both what you and I want to do is to get to the public, is to get to the people that really only hear the bad parts of our industry. They don't recognise the good. So how do we get to them?
Look, that's the $64 million question at the end of the day. And I think just by a lot of the stuff that we do now, which is trying to get that information together to be in a concise format that can go up on social media, can go up on platforms like Vimeo and YouTube, that's readily accessible to the general public, that and through using keywords and all that sort of stuff, that people can actually be drawn to that and see the positive side of the industry, because that was another reason why I started in this venture with Whiteline. Was everything everyone saw for a lot of the time was only when something went wrong, and they didn't actually see the really good things that happen within the industry. You know, you might get some of the regional channels would cover, you know, the convoys and stuff like that.
Yep.
You know, but they weren't actually getting to see the really, really good positive stuff that was going on, and so, you know, being able to showcase some of that stuff that people can go online and see. And then it'll draw them to other stuff that other production companies, not that there's very many of them, but other production companies are doing, that's also showcasing the positive stuff about the industry, you know.
So like you say, we never had social media before. You had the CB if you were lucky. We took a big step into UHF and we had a bit more range. There is very little industry history. There are very few books. There is very little of anything else outside the industry magazines now, and blokes have even said to me, I get to the point where I get out of the truck, I don't want to hear about trucks anymore. So through Truck That TV and Whiteline as a base behind that, you started off with a Sharing the Road video as well. You've done some others. You're going to do Whiteline shorts. We're looking towards a longer term is a proper television show about the industry. Now we've seen Outback Truckers is one, and it's got some really good and some not so good. We've seen another show about the industry on One Company that focused on some of those things. But whilst we want truck drivers to be involved, and you and I both know how hard it is to get them to do anything, they all want things to change, but we've got to get them involved first. And even on social media, most of the press we get is bad. It's a truck accident, or we saw earlier a piece where a bloke's got his truck jackknifed and kissing the wall. Everybody looks at that, but they don't see what you and I do for a job, and it is one of the things that we aim to do. So where do we go from here? How do we improve that?
I was really, really fortunate enough to be able to do a profile on Ken Easter and the company, and the really, really good things that they were doing in compliance. Now, you know, you roll your eyes and you think compliance, how terrible is it? But it's a necessary part of what we do now, and it's going to be going forward. And so I think more videos like that showcase what companies are doing from a safety aspect, I think will be really, really good, and that'll be a good way to get the message across. Other things about the industry and how we address it, I think, are a little bit more esoteric, because when you have a look at, you know, from my perspective with my kids, it was, you ever go near a truck, I'm going to kick your backside up around your ears, you know. And that's the way a lot of drivers feel about this industry, because, you know, it's one of those things, everyone talks about diesels in your veins, and it kind of gets in there.
It's
and
true.
You know, it is very, very true, and it's very hard to explain why it's like that, and it's very hard to explain why the lifestyle is what it is. You're away from home so much and away from your family, and we all miss them and everything like that. But it's not something at the moment that I think a lot of drivers would turn around and want for their kids, because you know, things like the fines now can be
A week's wages. You've
more
worked
than a
for
week's
nothing.
wages,
Yes.
you know, for very minor things that aren't even really. I mean, you know, we've discussed about the white line, you know, putting the wheel over a white line at a camera. I mean, it's not a safety issue, but that can cost you more than a week's wages and half your license, you know.
Yes.
So things like that have got to be fixed, I think, within the industry, and that's not for us to fix. We can highlight it, we can point it out, but it's not something that we can fix. That's for legislators to do, and for people like, you know, the ATA and associations to push to make it a fairer playing field. And I think if you're going to bring people into the industry and make it attractive, those things have got to be fixed.
But then someone has to push them. Currently, you and I would both know that every driver wants it fixed, and they want it fixed yesterday, and they're all cynical that nothing's been done. So you and I aren't going to fix it all tomorrow either, but
No.
we're going to have a go. That's what it's all about. And
But you
so-
see, you've got to ask the question, why did they become cynical in the first place? And the reason they became cynical was through lack of action. Nothing ever happens, you know, and I think that's one of the really, really important things from our perspective as a media outlet, is to highlight that stuff, and through highlighting it, pushing the
put
agenda.
that pressure on those people who can make those changes, and it gives us a chance to put it in front of people.
Absolutely. And I think that's the only way that we can help to drive change. Look, we can't make change, and the industry, as it is so sporadic. You've got people everywhere, and each part of the industry has their own requirements and their own belief on what's important to them. So you're never ever going to get that cohesion. So you've got to come somewhere in the middle to say, this is going to benefit everybody a little bit, you know. But I think it's people like yourself and, you know, media outlets like us that can drive the push for change, and hopefully something can happen in the future.
So we aim towards a full-on trucking TV show that will promote the positive, because we don't have that now. We aim to include more people, and we aim to push for change. Thank you very much, Stephen. I appreciate what you've done so far, mate. You and I are working together well, and let's hope it carries on and we make significant change and we make people safer on the road. Thanks for your time.
Awesome. And you're better on this side of the camera than I am.
And so to one of the hard questions involving our industry. Ben Maguire made mention of the fact that we need more truck drivers, and how are we going to encourage people in? We have the issues of lack of rest areas. We have the issue of lack of facilities. If we were to encourage women drivers in, where are they going to get access to toilets, and will they come and do a job when those facilities are clearly not available in so many places? The older blokes are getting forced out, the fines and the penalties, so we're trying to address that in some way. Younger blokes, the way of the world now has completely changed. We got into the industry because we loved it. We still do. That's why we do it. Ben and Maguire made mention of the fact it's an industry that people love. But loving it is not enough. We need people certainly to take part. That's why we've started the Drivers Club. We need people to be involved and get things to change, because it's not perfect. Do we really get paid for the time we put in? If we don't, can we encourage people into the job? So many drivers have said to me, I go out on the road, I live this life, yes, I love the job, but I can get paid more to drive a forklift with less responsibility, less possible injury, less penalty from those who fight to see us operate under their rules and laws. So how do you say to someone, come and do this job, it's fantastic? What do we do to change that? Now, Stephen made mention of his younger son. Is he going to come into the industry? If he does, he'll kick him in the backside. Then how do we get young people into it? What do we do to change that? We need your input. We need your comment. We need you to join the Truck That Australia Drivers Club. We need you to share our videos, and we need your help to make things change. Till next month, safe travelling.